To see everybody here, and I'm Michael Rinaldi, if you don't know who I am. I'm assuming a lot of you probably seen the books that I do now, the tank art books. If you're not familiar, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to try to split the hour into 3 parts, and I'll just cover techniques. The first part will be the hairspray, which I've prepped already here, and then I'll get into some oil work, and then I brought some pigment matches, and I'll show you guys how I do some of the pigments. Some of the pigment stuff that I do. So actually, and I'm going to try to, it's been a while since I've done a demo, so I'm actually going to set a little timer for 20 minutes so I can keep myself kind of on point, because I will talk a lot. So as you will realize, I could probably talk about hairspray for an hour without breaking a sweat. When I do seminars and demos, I find it very helpful for me. If you have questions while I'm doing this, it's not a problem for me if you interrupt me and ask questions, so feel free, don't be shy. I will discuss things on more of an educational level, basically the techniques that I use, the premises that I go by. I don't get too concerned about the labels of the products that I involve myself with for the work, because I think anybody that's really good with the techniques, you can kind of make any of the stuff work for you. So let's see here. What I'm going to start with is a hairspray. I've transitioned from, over the last couple of years, everything you see on the table in front of you here that I brought for display, I use hairspray from the start, and I use it just for wear and tear all the way through to extreme wear and tear. So I no longer just save it for winter whitewash. I start using the hairspray for chipping from the start, because I realized I can't paint a chip better than a hairspray chip can come out. So I find it I focus on techniques that are superior for the results that I get. And that's kind of how I've transitioned into using hairspray so much. And in the same conversation happens for the chipping fluids. The principles of using an airbrush to spray it is just all that's different. Everything else is basically the same. But I just stick with the hairspray because I just appreciate using the aerosols. So I think with that, I'll just dive right into it, because you just want to see what I do. So
You put in how much hairspray do you have on?
I don't have, I'm sorry, I'm going to actually show you how I do it. I've just got the base color. So what I'm doing is, the way I work now is I work in layers of paint now. I don't just paint it just the base color and then add all the colors on. I try to get as much underneath color built into the model as I go. So right now I've just got this little Stalinets tractor, painted it a rust brown. That'll be the chip color. So I've got a green mixed up, kind of a faded old green. I'll hairspray now to show you how I do it. I'll spray the green. We'll get right into the chipping. And then I'll probably I've got some yellows and oranges, and maybe I'll do like a little engine panel in a different color, just to show you guys another layer of chips on top of it. And then I've got this other demo model I've used for 3 years now, T34, that's more classic. And then I can just talk about some of those a little bit. And actually, why don't we pass that around. You guys take a look at that while I'm talking. Take your time, pass it back and forth. Those are samples I did for the 4th book. And everything that you see on there, I'm going to show you today, basically. Those are test samples I started to do. When I write the books now, what I've kind of gotten into more as the company itself kind of evolves, and what I'm trying to do evolves, and I kind of evolve, is I want to get into more of the teaching aspect of it. Getting you guys to know what I'm doing and what's the difference maker between when I say, hey, I threw a wash on it, because that's a general conversation we all have for decades now. Well, what does that mean in my world? You know, sort of a thing. What do I do when I put a wash on? What is its difference? Why does my washes look like that and others people don't? So that difference maker is kind of what I'm going to try to get into you guys. And that way when you go home and do your stuff, you're starting to apply that kind of thing. And everything I work with is very precise, control-driven stuff. There's a lot of realism factors I focus on with a hint of artistic flair, without getting too over the top. So when I discuss kind of a pin wash, and when I discuss chipping, when you look at some of those chips on there, like look at how small some of those chips are. And those panels are designed to be like 1/16 scale. I'm not trying to do anything else, but some of the marks on those panels are so fine and so reduced, you couldn't do it any other way almost, you know, and they're in the realistic form of the top layer is being pulled off of the bottom layer, which is how it happens in real life. And so it's just a win-win for everybody. So just kind of talking about how I get to that point is kind of where I'm taking everything. So I'm getting away from less product displays and product promotion kind of a thing to more of technique driven and getting you guys skill sets higher and higher and higher so you can advance yourself in the way you want to. Like, I'm not trying to give you a formula. I'm just trying to say, okay, well, if you're going to make a mark or a chip, whether you put 1,000 on something or 1, here's the best way to do it. And that's kind of where I'm coming from now as a professional modeler to kind of help everybody. So, with that said, okay, I use, as you've probably seen in the photos a lot, this is the second can I've ever used. It actually lasts a long time. So I've been spraying for 7 years. Bought this can, 3-4 years ago. The only thing is I just go for a medium hold and an aerosol, not the spritzers. You know, you want an aerosol, because what this does is, this is the reason I love the hairspray cans actually versus an airbrush a little bit, is that's a preset pressure. It's the same all the time. So I'm trying to take a technique that is very difficult to control. Some of you guys have probably tried it and your results are all over the place. The aerosol cans, at least if I define both the distance, how I hold it and how I spray it, I can kind of control everything a little bit. So it's kind of that attitude. When you get into the chipping fluids and loading the airbrush up and then trying to spray a clear liquid with an airbrush, to me it's always a little bit harder to figure out how much I've actually put on there. You know, did I spray too much this time? Did I spray too little this time? You know, what am I doing? And I might be 2 months in between a point where I do it one time and then 2 months later I do it again. You know, so this way at least I've tried to even out that conversation so that you guys, when you look at it and go, well, how is he getting that? Like, how is he doing that? Well, here's kind of, okay, if you can stick to this a little bit, you'll have a pretty good shot at it. And that's kind of what I've tried to do. So with that said, so typically I hold it about arm's length away. And you notice I don't hold it down, sorry, I don't hold it straight down. It's just real lightly. And you're gonna get it on your hand. This stuff is water soluble, it washes off immediately, and it's like no big deal. You're not gonna hurt anything, you're not gonna hurt any paint. I don't use any varnishes. There's no reason to protect this stuff. What we're gonna do to the paint layer on top of it will protect it. And in the models I've had, all these models, nothing's happened, nothing's changed. There's nothing, you know, that's gonna go bad in 20 years and this stuff's gonna fall off, so. But just try to, what you want to really work on and focus on is just laying down a real nice even coat. Obviously I'm handling this model quite a bit, but it's really light too. I feel like I could throw this thing across the room, so that's why I like metal tracks and stuff, because it helps to give a better weight to it. But. So I'm just giving it a nice even coverage. And then I always have a little hair dryer. No point in waiting for anything to dry. This is the first layer of hairspray. It goes pretty quick, actually. And the second layer, I don't get it too heavy. I just want to make sure I get a nice even coverage over everything. And spray everywhere. Don't just try to pick and choose too much, because it's always better to have some in places you'll never do it versus wishing you had it in a spot you want to chip and then not have the hairspray. So I just hairspray the whole model. It's not a big deal. And that what you've just seen there is basically, that's as much as they need to do. So again, typically you don't want to spray too close. There's kind of a distance relationship going on here. You know, whatever that is, in my world it's about a foot and a half, about, you know, half a third of a meter, half a meter, whatever. You can kind of pull it, you can start from afar and pull it in, you know, and just kind of mist it on. You're just trying to get a really even coverage. And it should look a little bit shiny. It shouldn't look wet, it should look a little bit glossy. That's actually pretty good. I've got a good feeling about this one, because hopefully it doesn't go bad. Now there's always a conversation about time. Everybody's always asking me, well, like how long and blah, 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 blah. I can go right into this right now. I can start painting and chipping and...
Could it be too much?
Yes, absolutely. And that's the variables of hairspray. Too little, too much. You know, if it's too much, your chips are going to be huge. And they're going to flake off in chunks. The brand of paint does matter. Tamaya, the acrylic lacquers, they just chip better in my opinion. The Life Color is kind of in the middle. Vallejos, you're going to fight. The T72, 3 layers of hairspray chipping, all Vallejo paints, nothing but struggle to get it done. And I had to switch up techniques. It's actually, I actually do a little page on that part of it. I had to switch up chipping techniques completely on this one because the Vallejos just won't chip after a point in time when you're layering them up. And with the Tamiya paints, I can layer so finely, so thinly with great opacity, great color, and I can just control my chips. This is all Tamiya paints. The AMX 30 is 5, I think, layers of total paint on that one. All hairspray in between, all chipped up, and it's all Tamiya paint. And it just worked beautifully. You know, 2-3 days I had 90% of the chipping done. This one was just a ball buster. You know, it just fought me the whole. So Vallejos, I just stay away from when I'm doing this technique. So they're great for a lot of stuff. It just I've never been able to control them the way I want to. So, and again, it's a lot of it for me is how fine I can get stuff. I'm not concerned about the big, massive stuff. I can get a big chip out of anything. I want the littlest, tiniest little mark I can find. And you see them on those little samples on there. There's tiny little ones in there. Those are gold. If you can get those are the money winners. Those are the ones that really will jump the model to the next level and you go, well, holy shit, how do you do that? And that's like, those are the ones you want. The big marks, you know, those are easy to get, but it's those little tiny ones, and Tamiya paints are what I like. So what I've got here is just, I've just mixed up a green, just kind of a faded Russian green, no big deal. I'm not concerned about the color of it too much. And this is thin with water. So with hairspray in particular, the top layer of paint that you're gonna chip off, whatever thinner you use for your paint, the strength of it will make a difference. So I've started to really get fairly decently good at spraying paint thin with water, which is not something we normally do anymore. But then when you see how I paint it, it's just kind of a thin, random approach anyway. So if you spray your top layer with lacquer thinner, it eventually will seal itself up and it's going to be really hard to chip with the water, with the chipping, with the brush process. So it's gonna be me painting for a second, so. And time's of the essence for me, so I'm not gonna get too. And you can see how, again, I'm one of those guys when I airbrush, just talking about just technique in general, I'm always in control. I'm not holding the thing down. I don't paint that way. So when you see a lot of this stuff, I'm building stuff up extremely slowly in the modeling essence of what we're trying to do. So I'm trying to just get a nice layer of color on here, build it up. And that controls the quality of the finish. Like when you get up close and you start seeing some of the paint work and stuff, the quality of that paint finish is going to make a difference. So just as a side conversation on the airbrushing. And this particular model has some unique features to it, just how it's styled. It's a little bit different than a standard tank model. So I try to get the color. And I'm not trying to do any color modulation right now. I'm not getting into any of that kind of stuff. I'm not trying to do a style feature here. This is just pure technique. So as you see me airbrush, it's nothing. I try to get the hardest spots first, that kind of a thing. And that avoids kind of putting down too much color. The aspects of hairspray chipping that matter to the opacity of the chip, the quality of the chips, the strength of them, meaning how bright is that one chip and how faded is the other chip. How much paint I put down, you're adjusting it that way. So if I get really opaque, in other words, if I put down a full camo coat, which with the T72 is a great example, this is a full camo coat, and I want just wear and tear from normal soldier stuff, nothing battle, this one isn't shot at and that's kind of a stuff. So I want some of the chips to just be normal stuff. The rest of the paint has to be a regular paint job. Right now I'm gonna do a little bit more faded. This is maybe sitting in the field for 10 years kind of a thing. Just because it's a little bit more dramatic and it looks a little bit better. But so when you work in different parameters, the opacities of the paint that I'm spraying make a difference. So when you get a thicker coat of paint, it will get harder to chip, and it's kind of a moving scale, as it is say. So that's kind of where I'm going with that a little bit. And in typical, I'm leaving some of the edges a little bit more brown. I'm not getting too concerned about it. This will definitely not be any show winner. And this is an acrylic paint job, so I mean the stuff's drying and I can literally start chipping as soon as I get kind of ready to chip. There's no time elements here involved. There's no I need to wait a day, I need to wait 2 weeks, I need to wait 20 minutes. It honestly doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. I know a lot of guys ask those questions on the forums and they get really concerned about it and then putting a varnish on to protect it and those kinds of things. And there's not a varnish on any of these. So it just, to me, it's more of a mental, if you like to varnish and you like to protect, if for peace of mind, go right ahead. I mean, it's no big deal. But so when you don't see me talk about it, I don't do it. And that's kind of another little, I get a lot of questions about how come I don't varnish, and I just think they're overused. There's no point. It just hides detail. It adds another process that I don't need to deal with. So varnishing is just one of those things I don't spend a lot of time with. Okay, so let's get to the fun stuff. Models like this are great because I just know in my head I don't have to really, I'm not following a photograph right now. I'm not trying to, really impress something on this. This is going to be a nice, easy chipping. So you can see some of the corners here. You're not really going to see that too much. But some of the brown's kind of showing through on this. And let's see here. What do we do? Okay. Yeah, that's good enough for this little demo. Okay, so I've got a little thing of water here. And I always have a paper towel handy. It's probably the most important piece on the table almost. I use paper towels all the time. Unloading a brush is a really critical thing. Anytime we're putting a liquid on a piece of model with a brush, I always unload it. Meaning I'll load it up first, I'll get it wet, and then I'm always dabbing it off. I do that with almost every technique I use a chemical with. And it's something a lot of guys will do this and put it right on. And you're going to start having trouble either in any kind of form. You're going to either put too much of something on the model. So I try to really control how much fluid and liquids that I'm putting on at any step that I'm doing. So paper towel, always at hand for me. Let's see if this is good. I'm going to work backwards here. Let's see if this will help out. You guys see it okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. So right now I'm just wetting the surface. I'm not chipping. Actually, some of the chips are already starting. This one's going to work really well. I can already tell. I laid a really nice, even hairspray down. These little louvers here are going to be great. Yeah, it's almost already doing itself. And I'm just kissing the surface. In fact, it's probably working too well in some spots, but that's okay. And that's all right. A lot of stuff, people get really upset about, and most of this you can fix really easily. If you ever have a problem, repainting something is not that big of a deal, honestly, at the end of the day. And I've done that many times. That Stug there has been painted quite a few times, actually. And I'm just basically loading a little bit of water up on this thing. Let's see, sorry. Everything's backwards in my head. Some of the big chip came there, which means I probably have too much hairspray in certain spots, and that's okay. Again, this is going to work for this effect. That's all right. I'm fine with this. I don't get too worked up about things. Happy accidents, as they say, tend to, and plus I'm doing it upside down. It's a little bit trickier for me. But I often work if something happens where I don't like kind of the effect. It's not that big a deal because I know I can generally touch it up. I can fix it with oil paints. I can fix it with pigment. And yeah, that's an armor thing in the aircraft world. It gets a little bit tighter. In some of the other fields out there, it gets a little bit harder with precision on some of these things. And notice the brush direction is important, how I'm flicking the bristles and those sorts of things.
you use other tools than brushes?
Yes. One of my favorite ones is, where'd it go? Here it is, and I'll get into it here. To me, it's paint stir stick, the little metal one. This is chromed, which it's got a little spoon end on one side, and it's got this beautiful thing, and you can do just a whole host of stuff with this guy. I use it for the linear scratches all the time, and what you want to do, go into a scratch once and get out. Don't keep going back at stuff. So a lot of times, it's really important to just kind of, go ahead, Alex, you can see. I'm going to wet this little section, this little sponson pontoon thing down here with the road wheels. Get it kind of going. So you want to come in here. I'm going to have to do this face in, but you won't be able to see it, but I'll be able to show you later. You want to come in and you just kind of, you hold it really good, and you just kind of, it's a one-time shot, so, you know, that's it. Beautiful. And you just want to kiss the surface. You just want this thing to kind of just touch the surface. You don't want to dig it into it. You can cut through the paint sometimes. You will make mistakes and those sorts of things. That's no big deal. Again, it's easy to fix. That's a beautiful little scratch, actually, and if I just left it there, I should. When you make a scratch, you can come back with the brush, and you can kind of start playing around with it, and yeah, there's a lot of hairspray on this, actually a little bit too much hairspray, which is good because you can see some mistakes happening when you look at the model in a bit. You can kind of, I'm just not going to have enough time to get through everything here to really. And you notice how, what's more important to me is that you guys see my brushwork with the paper towel, how I keep taking water off of the brush. I lay water on the model, I kind of unload the brush a little bit so it's just kind of damp and wet, and there's really not a lot to it, but you don't want too much water. I'll stab at it. It's just kind of it's just how I'm working the. There we go. There's some nice spots there.
What about lacquer finish? You still use that?
I do actually. That was how I had to switch to the T72, and I've got some here, so I'll be able to demo that real quick too. That's a scary one. It's hard for me to feel comfortable teaching you guys, or to say, hey, you should try this. You're basically putting lacquer thinner on your paint, and yeah. But I'll show you kind of the premise of it, and it's actually very effective. And all the thinner reduction ones, like if you're going to use any of the thinners on top of a paint and try to pull the paint off, it's actually really effective, I found. You know, you can get some nice fades and some blends, and it's very powerful. Just telling the general modeling public to do that is a little bit different story, you know. But basically, the crux of the matter really here is I use a variety of brushes. How I touch the model, notice it's kind of the edge, or I'm using kind of the, I'm not scrubbing hard at this, and it should not be difficult. This should come off almost all on its own, and a lot of it is here. The weight of the brush should just really, in the bristles, and I'm kind of poking and stabbing and making little spots, and I want kind of a gritty appearance. You want kind of the way the paint kind of chips off and fades, and I'm getting in here and scrubbing, and I've got various different brushes, wet them, get a little bit, and sometimes I'll brush my skin to see how much water's on it, and I can kind of tell, okay, well that's a little bit too much, and I'll unload it. So this process, my hand motion, is important. That's really critical to defining the control elements of what I'm going to do with each brush, and that's when you get into it and you're doing a competition model, you're doing a model for publication, like you really want to start focusing on it. That's when it starts to happen, when I've just got like my headsets on and I'm working at this all the time. It's this hand motion, just you're constantly going back and forth, and sometimes I just do it out of habit now. Like I'm just doing it while I talk, and that's pretty normal for me now. I'm probably crazy, but that's okay. And it's just using the various, and something like right now I'm cutting actually down a little bit through the primer. That's okay, because that little spot that I'm kind of showing up here, you're not going to see it on the camera, but there's a little edge here where the primer's starting to pop through. I'm just going to hit that with some graphite and some metal later, and it's already telling me what's going to happen down the road. And that's kind of another aspect to this process that has kind of reformulated how I paint and finish stuff. Is what I'm doing here is what I call now, and in the books, and I've talked about it a little bit online, is This is now becoming a roadmap. So the hard part's basically done, to be honest with you. If I'm doing a model and I've got it kind of chipped and weathered and at this, or at this early stage, well, I already know what I'm going to do with the oil paints now. I already know what I'm going to do with my pigments now because it's already all here for me to look at. I'm not going to have to reinvent the wheel in a week, or 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. If I come back to this and look at it and go, well, what am I going to do in this spot? If I'm focused and we're starting to stress on this, going, well, I want this part to be special, or I want this to kind of, sing really nicely and look good. And when you get into these mental conversations we all have, the beauty of this stuff is it's already here. So I tend to find it's a stress reliever. Like I don't get stressed out on like, oh shit, what's going to happen if I got to take 2 weeks and do something else, or if I got to take a month off, or if you guys only build one model a year, or whatever it is. If you come back to it, it's all here for us. So and that's a game changer. I felt as I've done demos and demonstrations in the last couple of years, having that conversation and realizing, well, wait a minute, it's talking to me what I'm going to do as I kind of move through it. So now I've just started telling you guys that. And that's really kind of the truth of the matter is when I get to some of these things, the marks in the construction that's happened in kind of the thing that I'm doing, all right, well, I know now this spot up here in the corner is heavily rusted, so I'm going to work on the oils and this, I'm already going to kind of know. So it's just execution. And it's now executing at a very precise level and getting to that point. And so this part is probably more critical in the storytelling aspect. Like if I'm going to chip and wear the place where the driver's going to hop on and off all the time, as we've all seen a million times on the footsteps of Jeeps and trucks and everything else, this is where it's all going to happen. That part of the story now has all been told right now. All I'm going to do later is just dress it up and make it look as good as it can look. But right now I've just told the story. And that's kind of what I try to get to is when you're getting into the point of elevating your models to another level, what you're going to try to do, each little section of it, the edge of a hatch, well, now maintenance guys have been coming in there and working on that thing. It's not, this is not like the next Star Wars movie story, but it's part of the model story. It's how the paint's happening. Why is that there? And that kind of defines when people say, well, all right, the chipping's way too much, or the scratches are way too much. Focusing on these kinds of things and working around that is going to change your models into, now that all makes sense visually when you first look at it. You should have a first glimpse of that and kind of get it out of the gate. You shouldn't be having to explain everything to everybody coming around and go, well, I just want it to look like this. It should kind of just say itself. Because we're all familiar with it. I mean, when a truck drives by on the freeway, we're all familiar with how it looks when it's all beat up. It's innate to us now. So getting to that point on the model is really what I focus on. And so I'll do a little bit more, and then I'm going to have to start prepping some oil so we can start doing some oil paints. Like I said, I could talk about this stuff all day long. Like it just goes fast. Like it just really... I admit this is not the best chipping job. So, but when you guys can, I'll pass this around. It's just a demo model. It's not the end of the world. And it's all Tamiya paints. A little Windex, spray it on. I could strip all the paint off if I wanted to, and go back. But I'm just going to focus on this little step up here by the driver's side and just kind of do some nice fading and chipping. And you will see though when you start to really look at this, there's some spots in here and they're pretty magical. I mean, this isn't cohesively the best thing, but overall, when you look at some of the little detail spots, there's some stuff that's really... And again, it's the Tamiya paints really blend out when you chip these out. The blending, the fading of the chip itself, some of these are just money. I mean, they're just like, you can't do this, even with the sponge, which I brought some, but I mean, I could get into it a little bit, but you just can't quite get this level. I can start getting into this, and then I'll shut up, and then you won't hear from me anymore. Just keep modeling away. This is when it gets really fun, too. I mean, this is when it starts to when things work the right way. It's definitely a real enjoyable process.
If you feel that you're getting to a point where, okay, you've done some chipping, and I said, oh man, this is really wrong. Did you just go back a step and just repaint it with a brush and just do it over it?
Going back to the conversation where I was like, okay, the quality of the paint job, if the quality of your paint job is good, in other words, if the airbrush work is quality, there's no orange peel, there's no runs, You know, if the quality of it's fine, I can come back in here and if I wanted to, oops, sorry about that. Let's try this real quick. So this little, show it up here. You can kind of see there's quite a bit of green taken off at that in this section up in here. So if I didn't like that, I could without doing anything, I could just take my hairspray. Where did I put it? And because hairspray is water soluble, now I've got hairspray in places I don't want it now. Because it's water soluble, one of the beauties of it is I'm not gonna, by the time I'm done with this model, if I just wipe that real gentle once or twice with the wet brush, it'll take a lot of that hairspray off, so that glossy texture that is sprayed in places I don't want it. But where I've got the brown here, say I didn't like this, I put a little hairspray in there, still got some. And you can do this for effect. You can do this for a purpose. In other words, if you wanted to do this, so there are basically
you can do that, and you can repaint it, and then scratch it a little bit more, and you can get layers of scratches.
That looks pretty good, actually. Looks like the dude repainted in the field, you know. And I can come back in and wet this again a little bit. And again, I know there's water on this, but it's my brush. And we can talk, if you guys really want to get on one-on-ones later, is just talk about how wet that is and how basically it's almost dry. So I'm putting very little water down. It's just a moisture, it's a kiss of, and I'm just trying to work it slow. Let's see where it goes. And when I first start seeing the chips, I've already got them. And now I've got like a double layer thing, and yeah, and that looks a little bit more what maybe I was hoping for. And that's the other thing too, is I'm maybe a little bit rusty from traveling and this kind of a thing, so my first attempt sitting here is probably not the best. Well, now I've done it for 20 minutes and got my groove on a little bit, as they say, and yeah, now it's starting to happen. These are looking really good, and it's the pressure of the brush. It's how delicate I'm not scrubbing this. This should not be hard. If you're fighting the model, the process has gone wrong. So if you're really scrubbing these things and things aren't happening, then you've got probably too little hairspray on it. Or the opposite is, as soon as you're putting water down, I'm getting flakes off. You're seeing that, you can see the paint flake almost. You can see it crack, and it's too wet, too much water, or too much hairspray, I'm sorry. So that kind of getting that distance and ratio, I can control that pretty much. I know that aerosol can will always kind of be similar the next time. And that's really kind of the gist of it. I do need to prep the oil, so I'm going to move on to the next little section. But if there's any questions on hairspray, and it's that simple. I mean, I could shut up about it, and it's pretty much that's it. There's nothing really else to talk about other than the fact that as the author of this, what I'm trying to achieve with it is really where I go with it next. You know, where I'm going to take the effects the next section. But I've got to start prepping some of these oils, so otherwise you'll never see that happen.
Would it be possible to pass the?
Yeah, here. Go ahead. Yeah. Don't. It's just a little demo model. It's no big deal. And I won't be able to use all the oil colors here, but I'll put some extra rust tones in there, some bleeding stuff, and then I'll get some dust colors going. And then I'll do some tinting of the green too. But fundamentally, the brushwork, controlling the quantity at every step of the way with everything, whether it's an oil paint, whether it's a wash, whether it's the water for the hairspray chipping, you really want to maintain control on your brush, and that's the difference maker. And you can always do too little, but you can never want to do too much. And that's, as we've learned this so many times, we've all overdone it a million times before. I could always do too little and then come back to it. But if I do too much, you know, that's a much harder problem to fix and fight. And yeah, I would say realistically too as well, every model I've done, bar one, I've had problems somewhere. I've just had something just not go the way I want it to go. So you get kind of in a mode of learning how to fix stuff and work with it and not get worked up about it, not get upset about it. But because I work so refined, whatever mistake I make, it's going to be relatively small in the general concept of what I'm trying to do. Sometimes I have stripped the whole paint job down and redone it a few times just because I didn't like the camo scheme. You know, that happens. But when you actually have an error happen on the model or something really goes wrong, like, that just doesn't look what I want. I'm working in such a small section, to fix it is not a big deal. And I think that's one thing that mentally I know going into it, it keeps me more relaxed as well. It keeps the stress levels down, because I think what we're trying to do is, if you're sitting here watching me, you really want your models to get to a much higher level, to a much better, you want to win a gold eventually somewhere, and those kinds of things are where, when I'm working, I'm not in a bad mood, I'm not stressed out, I'm not fighting these things. It's learning the control aspect and learning the refinement and kind of letting the roadmap of the chipping kind of tell me the story. It's cool, man. I just come right back in and here we go and off I go, and it's that good, and I like that. And that's been to me, the production aspect goes up a lot too. You can really start becoming what I call more efficient, not so much faster, but much more efficient. And your efficiency will bring speed with it, but you can really start to produce stuff in a manner that you want to produce it. And you can control that. Like, I know I'm going to go to this model kit and I want to do this effect on it, and I've got a pretty good shot at doing what I want it to do with it. Looking at a photo, looking at a set of markings, or, finding that one gem of an image that we all find now. And, Facebook's all this stuff has happened where we just have so much information around, and you find that one photo and it's just, there it is, the money shot, and that's what you want. But when you come back to that, when you have the kits, when you have all your aftermarket, your tracks, your whatever you're doing, you've got a good shot at it, because you can control the story as you go. And it's really technique refinement is really the difference maker in the end of the day. So that said, my beautiful little tomato stir stick, I love it. I'm just applying oil straight to cardboard. Yep. As you guys have probably seen those photos quite a bit now. I do this a lot. Same tube of paint since I've had in art school, so they will last forever, and that's 15 years old, so still good as the day I opened it. I don't buy a lot of oil paints, I'll tell you that much. I've got my first set, the 502s, and I've just been using them ever since. And if you're new to oil paints or have come back to oil paints, the quality does make a difference. Price tends to indicate quality, so spend a couple more dollars, a couple more Kroners, thank you. I was gonna say crowns for a second, but spend a little bit more money on the oil paints. Definitely makes a difference. Buy a reputable brand. The ones that we have for us, the model making brands, they're all pretty good. AKs, 502s, MIGs, everything Miguel's kind of done with this stuff, it's all been pretty good. So they last forever. So this first set I've got was 2007. And the only tube of paint, I don't think I even brought it with me. The only tube of paint that I've used up is Shadow Brown. And I've had to buy one more. So it's it's becoming efficient with the chemicals. Costs, as these kits come out, the Chinese can't slow down, and we can't get any faster. I'm trying to help everybody get faster at this stuff, but really what it comes down to is maximizing all our little products that we get. Alex is going to come out with 50 more things next week, and all those kinds of things. So I got about 20 minutes left here. I probably won't get to the pigments, I'm guessing, but let's see here.
But if it's okay with Alex, we can go a little bit overtime.
Sure thing, no problem.
And I can always do more discussion later, another demo later. If there is an opening window somewhere, we can run back up, and I can happy to show anybody anything. I'm here for the day. I actually do have to leave in the morning, so if you guys have specifics, get them out now. If there's something you want me to show you, please don't be shy. I'm happy to demonstrate anything. I can't dance on the table and stuff, but
That's later.
yeah, you don't want to see it anyway. It's not a pleasant sight. It's not a good thing. So I'm just laying down some general colors here. I'm not getting too crazy. But you can see with that, there's some spots on the chipping here that some of these are really nice. Some of these turned out really, really nice, and I would be pretty happy with that. But again, it's the scale of the matter. You know, you really, and some of these are actually not good, but the ones the kind of second round I did here, down on the bottom down there, just, I could work with that a lot and make something really just magical. So I can do some stuff here with the oils. So what, if you're not familiar, I know most of you probably are, all I'm doing is a cardboard pulls out the linseed oil that's in the tube of paint, because these are all artist stuff. For what we do, we don't want the linseed oil. It's too glossy, it's too wet, and it takes forever to dry. So by putting it on a piece of cardboard, it acts as a sponge, pulls the linseed oil out. I'm going to work a little bit faster, but typically you want to let this sit, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and it'll work up to about 2 to 3 days. So I've got a window of time from when these cardboard pallets the oil will solid up after a couple days, so I can use this pallet for a while. In other words, when I get to an oil stage, I kind of go, okay, well, I've got about a 2 to 3 day window. So if I start like on a Friday, I can go through a Saturday and a Sunday sessions, and then by Monday, I might have to make a new palette if I still need to use some. So let's see here. I've got some light colors, some green, some yellow. And again, for picking the colors, it's not rocket science. If I've got a green, I'm just using greens and browns and some yellows. You can use some blues if you want. If you're familiar with kind of warm tones and cool tones, you can control your color schemes a little bit. I'd say looking at things in front of me, the T72 again, when you get up close to it, you'll see the panels shift, or the panel shifting I do is much more subtle than airbrush work. In other words, if I'm spraying colors through an airbrush to get my paneling and do some of the different changes in tone, almost most of this, where the subtlety happens when you get up to within a couple inches of it, it's all oil work. And that's the power of it. When I realized what that was happening, I couldn't get it with any other technique. I just started using oils a lot. And that means moving oils away from just a wash, moving oils away from just an oil stain on the back of a tank or on a wheel hub. Moving oils into, I'm actually painting with it. I'm actually recreating the surface with the oil paint. And that was kind of that transition into why I put so much effort into it now. So with that said, do you have thinner? I just realized that. Ooh, is there thinner? I just realized I didn't have it. I'm just looking around. Any kind of enamel thinner. Do you have any enamel thinner or odorless thinner?
Yes, sir.
Oh, you're a lifesaver. Thank you, Alex. I totally spaced on that part.
Here you go.
Oh, perfect. Okay, awesome. Best stuff on the planet. When we talk about all the various enamel thinners, the Miguel stuff, any of his brands, doesn't matter. Anything with the oils, I always use the odorless thinner. I don't even waste my time with anything else. All the enamel thinners are just way too strong. They're way too powerful. This stuff is like butter. It just, the things you can do with it, it just operates on a different level. And I believe it to be just as a refinement process, is just a higher quality thinner on a technical level. So I always have 1 or 2 bottles of odorless thinner when I'm working with the oils. So just don't do the, you'll see that there's nitro thinner now, there's enamel thinner for washes, all these other thinners. Just stay away from them with this process. Just really stick to any kind of odorless thinner. And then Winsor Newton, again, quality is important. So if you do an art store brand, stick with a well-known brand label in the art stores if you want to buy a larger quantity or stuff. These things, again, the way I use it, I'm not drinking this stuff, so it'll last a long time. This, when you talk about you guys worried about buying stuff and those kinds of conversations, this will last quite a while. I probably use 1 a year, if you're wondering. So you can make it last quite a bit. And I'm doing a lot of work with it, so you can understand that that's probably not a smart idea, Mike. Double F on it. All right, so I do have to put the glasses on for this. So brushes. Okay, I'm a little bit of a mess today. I'm usually actually a fairly neat modeler, fairly organized. I like to keep it kind of nice and tidy. Typically you put a little piece of double-sided tape on the bottom of this. It'll hold it down for you. These cardboard pallets are so light, they get pushed around easily. I tend to have 2 or 3, 4 brushes in my hand at one time. I tend to use one brush per color spectrum. So if I've got greens on here, I'll have a green brush. If I've got yellows, I'll have a yellow brush. Try not to mix them up too much, just because things get muddy really fast on your brush. So the number 2 round, again, just talking about the tool, number 2 round, these are the low Cornells. They're fairly, I believe these are fairly international. It's just a middle price, number 2. I go through them fairly fast. But you want a decent brush. When you get to the oil paint work and the detail work, you want a decent brush. Something that'll, you know, I want a really nice fine tip out of that. And again, it just comes back down to precision and control. So enough bullshit talking, let me get to work. Okay, so I've got the section of the model I want to work on. I'm just going to work on this little platform here.